All right. Good to be back with you. Another episode here with Kim Rohrer. I'll go through her exact resume here in a little bit, but my favorite thing is like she's been a VP of people. She's been with people operations and recruiting and talent and culture and all the things that are important in HR, big business, small business. But one of the most fascinating things, Kim, about your experience is your experience in theater and your background. So I would love to know, how does that parlay into helping you become your HR superpower?
I feel like something's in the water because I've met so many former theater kids in HR just in the last couple of years. I feel like everyone's starting to come out of the woodworks. Maybe we're all deciding to show our true selves. There is definitely a theater to HR pipeline that exists out there. It's shown up in such curious ways in my HR work. I'm really just now starting to talk about it, I think, more and more, although maybe people will be like, you've been talking about this for years, Kim, shut up. We always say, like, people in theater are really good at building community, at working with lots of different personalities, with learning things on the fly and pivoting quickly. I always say a lot of startup work is just like community theater, or I think about like summer stock or something. We've got tiny budget and a couple weeks and put on a hell of a show. And that describes HR in startups very often.
And you get to see so many characters and personalities and
Yeah.
accept their role in this story for what it is. And I love that. Was that a career path you really wanted to kind of go down, or was it more of just a hobby, fun side of life?
I was planning on building a career in theater. I studied theater in college. I had big aspirations of working in literary management and dramaturgy, which is a word that I feel like I'm on a mission now. Like everyone will know what a dramaturg is by the time I'm done on the podcast circuit. But it's essentially, one side of it is helping playwrights craft their plays. So helping with edits and script adjustments and helping them to make a more cohesive story when you're dealing with new work, or if you're dealing with older work that's being adapted, helping the director and the team adapt an existing work. And then the dramaturgy side is all about research and presentation. So it's all about going really, really deep, learning about the world of the play. That's like the time frame, what was happening politically at the time. What did characters like this eat? What kinds of houses did they live in? What did it look like? So that you can really inform the creative team, the actors, the technical team on what they need to know about that production to make it as appropriate and realistic as possible. It's like things like everything from like, would they actually use this word in this time period, to is that period appropriate dress, to like, what conceptually might this character know about versus not know about if they, if this is their surroundings. I only learned this way, way later in life, but this is actually a job that I think is very well suited to people with my particular blend of neurodiversity. I was like, it's very ADHD friendly. It's like, find something super interesting, go really, really, really deep on it, tell everyone everything you know about it, and then move on to something else.
Well, it just sounds like the perfect avenue to help with HR as well.
Oh, for sure.
I can quickly see how this blends. I mean, I've got such a deep passion for company culture and storytelling with inside of business as a recruitment advantage. But you're now able to say, I can bridge that gap. I can understand the audience being the candidates and the business being the story. And I can find a way to tell the story in a way that resonates with them, but at the appropriate vertical. Is that correct? Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. I talk a lot about storytelling in HR. This is kind of my soapbox, definitely my area of passion. It's everything from your candidate experience to your new hire onboarding to performance reviews to announcing changes internally to shepherding someone through their exit of the company. All of these things are about the story. What do you want people to understand? What do you want people to know? It's all about how people feel. And if there's a story that they're connected to, they're going to feel something. And if they feel something, they're going to remember it. When you think about HR, often HR is the messenger, often messenger of bad news. So how are you marketing yourself? How are you marketing the news you're delivering? How are you telling a story about it instead of just like delivering news and hoping that people read it and remember it?
So we have a lot of HR leaders as well as small business owners and leadership groups that kind of engage with us in our topics and our content here. But Kim, can you tell us specifically when a business makes big organizational change or shift, How should they tell that story? Not just to be a compliance standard, but
Yeah.
actually how they connect with it so that it's more meaningful. It's not
Right.
just a here's down from HR, here's, we're all coming back to the workplace from work and, we hate the boss for this decision. But how do you actually parlay bad news into something that people connect with?
You mentioned this earlier, but it's all about connecting with your audience. And so when your audience is your staff, your employees, your team, how are they going to interpret this news? How are they going to feel when they receive this news? And then starting there, what are all the things that I would be concerned about, that I would be excited about, that I would be not sure how to feel about? And starting there and then crafting your communications to proactively address some of those potential feelings or reactions. You want them to come along with you on this journey. You don't want them to be just receiving something and then sitting in silence trying to interpret it and react to it. Unfortunately, I've been the orchestrator of more layoffs than I would like to have been in my life. And layoffs are often a time where the company is trying to communicate as compliantly as possible. And so often that means limited information. It's like, here's the bare minimum of what you need to know, more information to come at our all hands next week or whatever, right? But that actually does you a huge disservice because employees will fill in the gaps with worst possible scenarios if you don't tell them how to feel or tell them the most information you can. If you're not guiding them through the narrative of it, they're going to just fill in the blanks for whatever you've left out. And so really giving as much information as you can and even acknowledging like, it's okay if you feel this way. We did a lot of that at a previous company of mine when we were communicating with employees after a layoff. We did a lot of communication around complicated feelings. Like if like you may be feeling scared, you may be feeling guilty, you may be feeling sad, you may be feeling anxious, you may be feeling relieved. Like all of these feelings are normal and okay. And here are some resources that we've developed to help you through this transitional time. Instead of just saying like, here's the news, now everybody get back to work, which is what I've experienced. I've also experienced that side of it.
Yeah. I really like that phrase, filling in the gaps. Like they will fill in the gaps if you don't do it for them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we try to think of like communication should be succinct. Right. It should be to the point. And that's kind of how we're trained as like leadership is, right. And it kind of minimizes exposure to saying something wrong that you shouldn't say. But I like where you're going with this because we have to understand is people will tell their own story right. however they want. Right. And oftentimes we want to make sure they're telling themselves the right story that really truly aligns with this new decision of the business. Right. And we're thinking about announcements of, growth round of equity, we raised a round of funds to excel our business. And kind of you and I have talked about this in the past, but, and an employee might see that story as, hey, we just raised $300 million and I deserve a raise.
Exactly. But if the organization doesn't tell you, like, why did we raise this money, right? We raised this money and here's what it's going towards. That's the stuff that I think people often leave out because they're so excited to have closed the round. And rightfully so, raising a round is stressful and time consuming and it starts way sooner than most employees realize and takes a lot more work than most people realize. Once it's closed, the leadership team wants to like make a big splashy announcement and then move on. But employees don't have the context of we've been working really hard to raise this revenue or to raise this funding, and that's going to extend our runway by this many months. What does that mean? What does it mean to extend our runway? What was our runway before? Hopefully you'd already told them what the runway is, and that's why you're going out to market to raise this round. But if you missed that step of the communication, now it's time to share that with them and say, we raised this round and here's where it's going to go. You can precede your FAQ with the question is everyone always asks. This is like predictable as, I don't know, the tides. When you raise a round, people will expect that they're getting raises. So you can precede your FAQ with, does this mean we're all getting raises? And then you can answer that question for people so they don't automatically fill in an assumption that they have. Right or wrong. Maybe everyone is getting raises. Maybe part of the fundraising for this round was you wanted to raise enough money so that you could bring everybody's compensation up to market or up to compliance with your new compensation philosophy that says you pay 75th percentile, but you recognize that really most people in the company are at 50th percentile, and this round will allow you to bring everyone's compensation up to the new standard you're setting. If that's part of the story, like you should tell that story so people understand. And like That might mean if you are already paid at 75th percentile, you might not be getting a raise, because our goal with this money is to bring everyone closer to that goal. I think we're a little afraid sometimes in HR and in executive leadership, certainly, to like pull back the curtain and let people know how decisions are being made, especially around compensation. But the more information you can give people, the more you can let them in and show them it's not just making up a story. I think sometimes we confuse storytelling with fiction, like telling them what the journey is that got you here, showing them this is how we make these decisions. They can agree with the decision or not agree with the decision, and they can choose to do with that information whatever they want. But if you're not giving them the information, then they're not making informed decisions.
And all it really takes is that one person that's just doing the water cooler conversation that's like, I'm
Right.
pretty sure this means we're all getting a raise. And then
Right.
before you know it, that spreads like wildfire.
Right.
You've got to proactively communicate good news, bad news, sideways to protect it from going a direction that's unintended. You're absolutely right.
And that can go both directions, right? That can go in this way
Yeah.
of like positive rumors spreading. People are spreading exciting rumors, or it can go the opposite. Like, oh, we're raising a round. If we don't get this round, the company's going to go under. It's like, well, is that true? Where did you hear that? Like, why is that the story we're telling? So really being communicative with people, there's always a line of how much you can share and how much you can't. And I'm always the annoying person in the meeting being like, why aren't we sharing that? Can we share that? Is that okay to communicate internally? And of course, you have to always remember that whatever you communicate internally could be copy pasted, could be screenshot, could be shared externally. Memos get leaked all the time. So you have to be cognizant of that. But if you tell employees, like, this is strictly confidential, we are trying to raise this much money. What will that money enable us to do? It'll allow us to double our sales team. It'll allow us to extend our runway exactly as we are today without hiring. It will allow us to give everyone raises. It will allow us to acquire that company we wanted to acquire. Whatever the reasons are, there's a reason you're raising money. And so share those reasons with people, and let your team be a part of that journey.
I love all the different roles that you've had, but I would specifically love to hear some ideas on ways that HR can help shape company culture. And I feel like company culture is whatever it is to you. You think that's what company culture is. Like it's a vague phrase, terminology that's never really been definitively kind of put down as like, this is what company culture means. If someone in this is listening to this in HR, how do they put their shape on the company culture of the organization? What are a few tactical things someone can do to help create a more balanced or defined or better company culture?
So the way I look at this is that your role is not to create culture. Your role isn't even necessarily to shape culture. Your role is to codify the culture that exists. And if it needs to be nudged in a certain direction, you can certainly do that. Lord knows I've had to do that many times. But you can't start out by saying, this is our culture, or I'm shaping our culture to make it more like this. You first have to identify what is your culture already. If you haven't defined it, if you haven't written it down, I don't just mean like writing your values on the wall, but culture is the decisions you make. It's who you promote. It's how you hire. It's how you make business decisions, what customers you say yes and no to. It's how you develop product. It's your philosophy on customer support. It's everything. It's whether you have back-to-back meetings in your calendar all day. Like all of these things are part of your culture. And so really sitting down to define and write out, this is what our culture is. We're going to take this nebulous, good vibes feeling of culture, and we're going to put it into words. We're going to say, this is our mission. These are our values and how our values help us serve our mission. And here are some behaviors that we can attribute to our values. And here's some behaviors that are not our values, that are things that I don't want to say punish, but like the things that where we bring in accountability, let's say. That's the biggest piece of culture that I think people forget, is that culture is not just about all of the good things. Culture is also about, what do you do when something is not aligned with your culture? How do you identify those things and what do you do about them? So that's like the first step to me is like, I'm a words person, obviously, but I always think the more you can codify something and define it, the more you can focus your work. So I'll just give one example. I was coaching an HR leader who was going through an exercise of trying to define their culture. And she realized that there were a number of things that were happening in the company where she's like, this is what our values say, but this is what actually happens. This is what we say, how we say we do meetings, but this is actually what happens. And identifying those gaps allowed her to then bring a case to the leadership team and say, hey, do we need to rewrite our values or do we need to change our behaviors? Because these things are out of alignment right now. And that makes for a very confusing and often hypocritical cultural experience for people.
How do you feel like AI changes culture? I mean, that based on what you said, I really like how you define company culture. But how does AI change, shape, or define company culture?
AI is like the word of the moment. Everything is AI right now. The thing that I see happening where AI has a negative impact on culture is I see it a lot. And someone that I follow on LinkedIn just posted about this today that their CEO is like, HR needs to implement more AI. And they're like, great. What does that look like to you? And they're like, more AI. Okay. What's the goal? What are we trying to get to? Use ChatGPT. Like, okay, but why? What for? What are we trying to solve? What's the need we have? And so that's where I think AI is impacting culture in sort of a tricky, sticky way of HR leaders in particular and employees in general are being told to become AI literate, to start implementing AI, to be an AI first operating team or whatever you want to call it. But there's not a lot of guidelines or guardrails around what that actually means. Like, should I be using AI to write my performance reviews? Should I be using AI to automate my workflow? Should I be using AI to write the marketing copy for our website? Should I be using AI to respond to customers? Like, it's this, as with any cultural thing that you're implementing, any new program, you have to understand what is the goal of this thing that we're doing so that we know that we're all kind of marching in the same direction. And it's not one team has interpreted we're going to be an AI forward culture here now to mean they're going to create, I don't even know. I'm very AI barely literate, so excuse my terminology fails. But like, I'm going to script a bot to do this whole bit of work for me. So now I don't have to do that work and I can do my own projects on the side. I've seen that happen. Or does it mean a team's going to say, well, now we're going to, instead of having customer support agents responding to queries, we're going to have an AI bot as the first line of defense. Like, a lot of companies are doing that right now. Both of those might be valid, or neither of them might be valid, but like, what are the expectations? How do you want people to use AI? And the one other super, super bad thing I will call out is when leaders start using AI to write their communications for them and don't check their work. I've seen far too many executive communications go out where it's clear that they typed a question into ChatGPT and then copy pasted the answer. Where I'm like, this model was not trained on your voice. It doesn't know who you are, how you talk. It doesn't have any of your personality in it. Like, maybe it's not like completely bogus, but it's like not human. It doesn't sound like you wrote it. It doesn't sound like your words. And employees can tell, it's not just about like, did you use M dashes or not? Like, cause that's just bullshit. Anyway, it's about infusing things with your voice and your personality and having employees see you as a human who's communicating with them, not just like as a Zoom screen or a Slack message conveying a random message.
Well, I think that goes to a topic that is very common right now amongst HR practitioners, which is I'm being asked to do more with less. My teams are getting bigger. My HR team is not growing in accordance with the growth of the company, but yet I'm asked to do the same amount of work plus more and with less resources. How do you keep the human side of human resources intact when it's getting spread so thin? Can you help me walk me through that? I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, that's common. I have never known an HR world that doesn't look like that. That has been my entire career. Sometimes have been better resourced than others, and largely that's attributed to who's in leadership and what their perspective is on HR teams. But for the most part, it's common knowledge that HR teams are overworked and understaffed. And especially over the last 5 years, that's just gotten harder and harder and harder with the landscape that we're in the world today. The thing that humans in HR are the best at and are uniquely qualified to do is to be I mean, literally like relating with the humans, talking with the people, being a resource to people in a way that a bot can't. And so I think the way that I have always approached this is to be really practical with the people I'm working with. In my earliest days, I was all about the like, we're overworked, we're underpaid, we're stressed out, we can't do all of this, it's too much work. Well, and like, that's not a business case for more headcount. Like that's an emotional plea for help because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 25. And now I look at it more like a business case. How does any team get headcount? How does any team get reprioritization approved? And you have to really just make the business cases for things. So I recommend documenting everything your team is working on, everything your team is doing. You can do capacity planning like they do often in sales teams, recruiting teams, support teams, where it's a lot more metrics driven. Like, you know that one recruiter can typically handle this many open recs of this type, and it takes 6 months to fill an open rec. So you know that this is how many recs you can open in a year. It's like math. There's a reason I'm not in recruiting. And it's not mostly math capacity planning, but it's very metrics oriented in that way. In the same way a sales team, you know, how much revenue a salesperson can deliver. It's a little harder when you're dealing with things like employee resourcing or assistance, and where the workflow changes and you're like, I'm managing programs and I'm also supporting people like a customer support agent, and I'm also dealing with vendors, and I'm also navigating compensation. I'm doing all these things. It's a lot harder to make the case when it feels like there's just so many balls in the air. I'm spinning all the plates and one of them's going to drop, and I can't take the time to figure out what I'm doing and convince people that it's too much. So what I've done in the past with teams is we will take a couple hours and do like a mini team retreat. And sometimes I'll block time out just for myself. Sometimes I do it with a group, depending on what my team is like. But really just chunking out like 2 or 3 hours for yourself to map out like, what does a year in the life of your team look like? Assuming there's no global crises, assuming there's no major issues, assuming you don't have to turn over an executive, assuming there's not a fundraise or a layoff or any of these other things that will disrupt your flow. In a solid year, you know approximately how many people you are going to be onboarding and approximately what that workload looks like. You know you're going to do a compensation review. You know you're going to do performance reviews. You know you're going to have manager coaching, and you know you're going to have general learning and development programming. You know you're going to have benefits, open enrollment. Like, you have all these things that are predictable. So mapping them all out in whatever tool you like, you can use a spreadsheet, doesn't matter. Map them all out so you can see them, and then tie each thing to a person. So like, who do I have on my team that's working on this? And then you start to see over the course of the year, like, you have these maybe lulls, peaks and valleys in terms of your team's capacity. Really just then treating it like a product roadmap. Like, we have to launch this product in June, which means we have to start working on it in March. And here's how many people are going to be working on it. And you don't have to get like super, super deep into like, this is how many hours this project takes. But you might, like, I always knew like, okay, well, if open enrollment's in October, starting in August or so, this person on my team who handles benefits and comp is going to be like heads down on open enrollment. And that means that we're not going to have as much capacity to take on this random reorg that a manager is throwing our way. And if we want to handle this random reorg that a manager says is urgent priority, we know that that's going to cause delays elsewhere. And being able to speak in the language of trade-offs is really, really important for especially understaffed HR teams. My friend Lars calls it the department of +1, because everyone just keeps +1ing things onto your plate. In startups especially, but in tech companies in general, there's a lot of urgency and there's a lot of false urgency. And so everything becomes a priority and nothing is ever deprioritized. So it's really important as people teams that you're not just accepting everything that gets handed to you, but that you're taking it and saying, let me see if I have the capacity to prioritize this right now. And then you can go back and take a minute and look at your list and see, okay, I can do this bit of work. It means that this is going to get delayed. Let me bring that back to my CEO and say, hey, I can totally take that on right now. That means that this other thing you asked for is going to get delayed. Is that okay? Is that a good trade-off? And they might say like, no, never mind. That other thing is more important. Do this after. But if you're just saying, yes, let me do it. Yes, let me do it. Suddenly you're working 60-hour, 70-hour weeks and still feeling like nothing's getting done.
Well, I think it's super reasonable, especially in the tech startup space. Like,
you would think so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about sales and marketing, which is like the lifeblood of these startups, is the Aaron Ross mentality, which is predictable revenue, which is all about,
Right.
3 of this plus 4 of those times these of these widgets equals this outcome. And I think people operations, HR, we forget to probably document and have
Oh
a
yeah.
board of all the tasks that we're doing. And then I think even a simple like task management system like Notion or ClickUp or Asana, something to
Hmm.
the effect of saying in a real-time dashboard with your leadership team, here's exactly all of the things we're working on, all the
Right.
prioritization schedules.
But I will tell you, Ryan, there is not often a huge skill set overlap between people who are hired into HR roles and people who are really good at project management and documentation.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
HR leaders, HR teams, often the ones, especially in these teams that you're talking about that are understaffed, under resourced, often they're people who, like myself, are like Enneagram 2. I'm a helper. I want to get in and help people as quickly as possible and fix things as quickly as possible. I don't have time to be documenting everything I do and like managing sprint cycles and all that stuff. The best, most effective, productive time in my HR career was when I was working at Oyster and we had a people team chief of staff who was a kick-ass project manager and kept us on track in our Asana board and made sure our projects were moving along and make sure we were documenting things. And I'd say yes to a project and be like, wait, where does that fit in on our roadmap? And I'd be like,
Oh,
what
that's
roadmap?
fun.
Oh yeah, we have a roadmap. Like you need
Everyone needs that.
someone, every other team in the company has someone with that skill set, right? You have sales people whose jobs are, I mean, part of their job is
Sales
tracking
management.
clients, but
Yeah.
like you have sales management, right? Who's
Sales
managing their
ops. Yeah,
pipelines.
absolutely.
You have ops, you have engineering, you have product managers. You have these people across the company, but HR is just usually expected to kind of do it themselves. And it's not often a skill set that HR people possess. There are absolutely people who do. We had an incredible people ops team at Oyster with people who really focused on the operations side of people ops. I think a lot of the time we hire people in people ops who are more on the people side,
Yeah.
which is important too. But if you don't have anyone who's an operations focused people leader, you're going to take on way too much and not keep track of it. I say this from experience. This was my career for like the first 10 years. I didn't understand the value of having like project management and operations as like a leadership skill set for my teams. I just was trying to muscle through it all myself. And then when I worked on a team where I wasn't expected to do that because there was a head of people operations and a chief of staff and people operations specialists who were expert in operating the people function. And I was no longer trying to pretend that I was good at that. It's like, oh, like this is its own role. This isn't like a skill that I need to have to help me do all the other stuff I'm doing. Like this is its own job. And what a world it would be if we like let people do the things that they were skilled at.
They're best. That's a Marcus Buckingham thing, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Gay Hendricks' Genius Zone. It's like, what is in your Genius Zone? And I will be the first to say, project management operations, not my zone of genius. I love, love, love being held accountable by someone who loves holding people accountable to their tasks. Give me all the reminders. I will never be offended. That is just not how my brain works. But for a lot of people leaders, we expect them to be everything.
What is your ZOG, Kim? What's your zone of
My
genius?
Zog. Oh, I've
Yeah.
never heard it called a Zog before.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. My Zog. My Zog is in the strategy and storytelling. I'm really good at seeing the high level big picture and envisioning things that don't exist yet and seeing like we're here now, but look where we could be, inventing new ways of doing things, seeing how things could be in the future. And I'm really, really good at telling the stories and communicating with people effectively and making sure that this works really well with employee experience, which is where I've spent a large part of my career. But seeing what do we want the employee experience to be from start to finish, and how are we moving people through that experience with story? How are we moving them through that experience with the types of communications we're giving? And then how do we actually physically do all of those things is where I partner with my ops folks who can be like, okay, well, this is a task that can be automated and this is a meeting that has to be set up manually. And Kim, can you write us a thing here so we can insert it into this workflow? And that's like where the partnership really starts to make magic.
Your background is in kind of experience once they become employed, or do you look at the whole thing, every touch point, even for the time they read the job description?
I look at the whole thing from really like from the first time your eyes land on our careers page or the job description that pops into your LinkedIn, all the way through how we engage with you as an alum.
Now, tell me how influential that is, because I see a lot of terrible job descriptions, and I mean
God, they're so bad.
terrible. So, how can somebody create a meaningful experience even in the first interaction, that first job description, and why is that important?
Well, it's important because, I mean, in today's market, people will apply for just about anything because it's a mess out there right now. But if you're trying to find the right candidates for your company, the people who are going to really be that culture fit, that value add, that whatever you want to call it, they have to know who they're applying to work with, right? And if they're doing the like spray and pray method and they're just applying cold to everything they see, this isn't for them. This is for the people who are like taking the time and space to think about what they're applying for, fill out applications, customize their applications for each company. But, you know, they say that employees decide within the first 2 weeks whether they're going to stay at a company long term. And that starts with the way they first interact with you. You have to make the job description about them, about what they're going to do, what their experience is going to be like. You're painting the picture that makes them want to work for you. So many job descriptions are just like 6 paragraphs about why the company is so great and what they've all achieved. And then here's a job description. I hate to say it, but in this market, that's probably fine for most companies. But for companies that are really trying to connect with specific people or specific types of people, make that opening section about why they should want to work for you. Not just like, we're a company that does this and we raised this much money and our leaders are amazing. I saw a great one the other day that was written by the CEO, or it was written as if it was written by the CEO. And it's like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm the CEO of this company. I started this company because XYZ.
That's great.
Here's how we've grown over the last several years. This team that you would be working on does this, and here's why this role is important to that team. Here's what you would be doing. And then it's like, you know, job description, qualifications, and then it closed with the wonderful addition that a lot of companies are making now, which is that underrepresented groups often don't apply for positions where they don't meet every single requirement. Like studies show this, link to study. I was like, great job. And then they said, please apply, even if you don't feel like you meet all of the qualifications. This list is a nice to have, not a must have. And then you get people who are applying who understand what their place on the team would be. Bonus points if you do like your first 30 days, your first 60 days, your first 90 days. I've seen companies put that effort in to say, when you're in this job, here's what it will actually look like for your first 3 months. To me, that's like bonus points. That's wonderful if you can do that. Not every team has the capacity to do that type of communication, but good Lord, you should have it on the internal side before you hire someone. Because how many times do we see companies hire someone and they get there the first day and nobody knows what they're going to be doing? This is why I focus on employee experience, starting from the candidate experience, because I mean, I've been asked to open job recs before, Ryan, where we didn't even know who all was on the hiring team. It's like, how are we supposed to be building a recruiting process if we don't even know who's going to interview these people? Why am I reviewing resumes when I don't even know where they're going to sit? Like, this is crazy. The more you know about the role and what it takes to be successful in that role in advance, yes, it might delay your hiring process by a week or two while you get your shit together, but you're going to have a much better employee experience, candidate experience, and you're also going to have a higher success rate because people will be going into it. The team, the management is prepared to take this person on. They've already written the 90-day plan. They're interviewing candidates with that 90-day plan in mind. And then when the candidate starts, they're like, hey, remember that first 90 days we talked about during your interview? Now we're getting started. And it's already familiar to them. They already know what to expect. They're not starting their first day with 6 hours of Zoom calls and not knowing who their manager is.
I've seen a lot of companies who the job description really becomes one-sided. It's a one-sided conversation all the way through, where it's like, this is how you're going to serve us. Yes. And this is exactly what we want out of you. And you better be prepared to do this. And you forget to basically create that balance from the very beginning of, here's how we can benefit you. Here's how you can benefit us. And here's how we can dance together and move forward in kind of harmony. And
that job description, often the last time you see it is when it gets taken down off the website.
Yeah.
And no one ever refers to it ever again. And instead, that should be part of your new hires welcome packet. Is like, here's a reminder. Here's your job description that we hired you for. That way, if things change, as they often do, you can refer back to something and say like, this is changing. And then the employee has some power. It can say like, this is adding stuff to my job, or this is taking away a part of my job that I really was excited about. And they have some tools to start the conversation instead of being like, was this part of my job description? It does everyone a service by empowering the manager and the employee to have that job description and any notes from their interview process. And like, it's all part of the story. When someone's joining a team, I love being able to share all that information. Here's the hiring packet from the person you just hired.
We're seeing on our side a lot of small business owners that are talking about how often new hires quit within the first 90 days. They'll come in, they'll be all excited through the interview process. They show up for a little bit of training, and then all of a sudden they're just ghosting you and you never hear from them again. And, you know, they chalk it up to this generational shift. And the reality is I feel like that they do a disservice of quality communication during the hiring process to truly align expectations, because every job seeker that takes a new role experiences speed bumps. And it's really about us as an organization on how we navigate those speed bumps. Did we tell them to slow down and we're going to experience some turbulence along the way, and that's okay, and this is normal, and here's what we can see through it, and here's how we overcome it? But instead, it's a blind speed bump, and they hit it and it's jarring, and then they're like, this is not what I signed up for. Is that something kind of you help, you know, leaders think about as well?
Absolutely. I've had so much, I've done a couple of these discovery processes recently where I come in and look through employee engagement survey data around a specific problem the company's facing. And often it's about manager performance. And often I hear managers saying, you know, people are quitting, we're having attrition, people don't listen, blah, 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 blah. And then I see the employee feedback and they say, my manager hasn't met with me for a one-on-one in 6 months. My manager cancels all of our one-on-ones. And that's a huge problem, right? Like,
terrible.
A huge part of engagement in your first 90 days is, how is your manager participating in your onboarding? How are your teammates participating in your onboarding? Are you meeting people from other departments? Do you feel connected to the company vision? Do you know how your work impacts the company? But instead, a lot of people just consider, you know, great, we needed someone 3 months ago. Your butt's in your seat. You're working great, problem solved. But this person is still brand new to your organization. They haven't been working there for 6 months. They don't have that like legacy connection. They don't feel necessarily even connected to your brand and your product and your vision and your customers. And they're just like there to do a job. And if they feel alone, especially in a distributed workforce, if they don't feel like they have connection to anyone, why would they stay?
You know, you're exactly right. Speaking of managers and kind of quitting, I think a lot of small businesses, especially small businesses, don't realize DDI did a survey and they analyzed an enormous amount of data of people that quit. And they found that 87% of millennials that quit their jobs was due to mid-level management. Their front-level supervisor was the number one driver. It wasn't compensation for them chasing the next 10-cent raise, which is what we always assume it is. There's a lot of things that it's not, but a lot of things that it is. It's mid-level management that miss great communication opportunities, telling the company's story and putting forth those core, like we started the show, the core values and how important that is. I think that's often missed at that mid-level management.
It's not all the mid-level managers' faults either. So many mid-level managers are individual contributors who were promoted into management and didn't have any of their IC tasks taken away from them. So they're still doing an individual contributor workload. Maybe it's down to now like 80% of their job instead of 100. But then they're asked to manage a team with no extra resources. And management and individual contributor work are two completely different jobs. They're different skill sets. They're different ways of time management. You're doing two different jobs. And so if you're splitting, you have that context switching throughout your day where you might have a one-on-one with someone, or you might be coaching someone on something, and then you have to turn around and write code, or take a sales call and then turn around and coach someone on their sales call. Like, that's a lot of context switching for people. And we're not adequately training our managers on how to balance that. And we're overworking them. I have a friend who's a management expert who says you should devote 10% of your time to each employee that you manage, which is okay. Maybe if you've got like 2 direct reports, 3 direct reports. But I've worked with plenty of managers who have like 8, 9, 10 direct reports, and those reports have people under them. It's like, okay, so now I'm devoting 90% of my time, let's say, to my direct reports.
It's a lot of work.
unless my IC responsibilities have been completely stripped away, I'm probably working 150%.
Yeah.
Right. And that's capacity planning. Again, that's like one of the biggest pushbacks that I would do in org design work back when I was in-house was when teams were being consolidated or when someone's being promoted into management, who's handling the rest of their workload? How many direct reports are we putting under this person? Can they actually handle that capacity? Do they want to do this, or are they just becoming a manager because they want to make more money? That's a whole other podcast for a whole other time, is manager compensation. And when the only way to rise up in your field is to become a manager so you can make more money. I don't even have words for how bad that is.
Yeah. I mean, that's the corporate ladder, facade that everyone's just trying to put out there. Yeah.
Right. It's such a bad model because people are different and not everyone has the skill or the desire to be in management. One wonderful, successful case where we promoted someone into management, he realized he hated it, and we demoted him back to an IC role, but at a level that was the same seniority as his management level had been. Because really, he didn't want to be a people manager. He wanted to write code, but he was at a high enough level that it was like, well, the natural step for him is to become a leader of this team. But he actually hated being a leader of the team. Yeah. He just wanted to be like a senior coder. It's like, well, that doesn't exist, but why doesn't it exist? And this was in my early HR days, my answer to everything was, well, why can't we do that? Like, who says I can't do that? So I was like, well, let me do some research into IC career paths. It's like, yeah, we can have 2 career tracks. We can have an IC track and a manager track. And then we get people funneled into management who really want to be managers, who don't mind that they're spending less of their time writing code and more of their time coaching people because they really are passionate about coaching the next generation of great engineers. But we don't give people that opportunity a lot of the time.
Kim, that's a big takeaway for me. I really like that idea of talking to leadership in organizations to think about creating different tracks intentionally, the IC versus a manager's role, and kind of where do you want your top performers to land? And having that vision for them at day one helps them know what their stickiness within that organization is as well. Because if you have someone that wants to take the manager track, they want to do the extracurriculars to get to that management level to manage teams and people, but yet you just keep forcing down this IC workload on them. There's not alignment, and chances are you're going to have an A player that's going to bounce that otherwise would have stuck around if you just had that hard conversation.
And because they'll just go to another company that'll pay them more money to do their IC role, because the best way to get a raise is to change companies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of my greatest days were when I was promoted laterally assigned to a senior IC position that was at the same level as my director level role. We were consolidating teams, and my direct reports were going under someone else. And my boss was like, are you cool with not having a team? I was like, actually, I would love to not have a team. I can manage people. I don't mind managing people, but it's not my favorite thing. I love being an individual contributor. And like, if this is a role that's available, then like, yeah, I'm absolutely not going to be offended or hurt by giving my direct reports to someone who wants to be a manager.
Kim, I've loved this conversation, but you know what I love even more is your podcast, HR Confessions. I've been getting into it. Will you tell everyone just a little bit about it? Because I want people to follow you, and I want people to hear it.
Oh, thank you. We are just in the beginning of recording episodes for season 2. So it's a very exciting time. HR Confessions is think of it like a gossip podcast, storytelling podcast with an HR business podcast all combined together.
The drama.
Oh, the drama. It's people submit their real drama to us, their real HR stories to us. My co-host Rebecca anonymizes them and writes them up into a little story. She shares them with me live while we record, and I react accordingly. She'll pause and ask, okay, as an HR leader, what would you do in this situation? And sometimes the person in the story does not do that. And it sparks some very interesting conversations. But truly, there is some wild stuff going on out there in the world. One of my favorite things about this podcast, especially for people who are not in HR, is it's really a peek behind the curtain into all the random stuff that ends up on HR's plate and all of the wild situations that we may or may not be trained for that we end up having to deal with. And most of all, it's just entertaining. We want this not to be, you're not going to learn a big lesson or Maybe you will. I don't know. You're not going to learn like big, huge business lessons from this podcast, but it's a good little dose of entertainment and laughter at a time when we really, really need it.
But I think it's the reality that HR is kind of becomes this backdoor therapist of like confessionals
Yes.
of
Oh
like,
my God.
there's a lot of details that kind of start coming through the HR door
Yeah.
that people don't realize is, I mean, we kind of
Yeah.
assumed, but we didn't know
Yeah.
how much is out there, right?
We learn so much about people in this role. Some of the stuff we never wanted to know about our coworkers, and we end up having to hold so many secrets. And there's not a lot of places to kind of let that out, to vent those, to tell the stories, to have a laugh about the crazy stuff you saw at the holiday party, or the thing that person did on the company retreat that
Oh
you
my
ended up
gosh.
having to deal with. We all have these stories. And Rebecca, she has a much more active social life than I do. And she gets a lot of stories. People come to her when she's like at a meetup, and someone comes up to her and they're like, I have a story for your podcast. You
And
will
these are
not
all
believe this.
real stories.
yeah.
We're not making that.
Oh,
We're not
yeah.
using
No,
Chat
no, no.
GPT. We're not doing the
No,
AI
no.
thing.
No,
These are
These
real.
real human stories.
Oh my
The
goodness.
fun thing is, my co-host Rebecca is the co-founder of a company called Skill Cycle, and her clients are all HR people. She's a former HR person herself. So when she has client calls, it's often this, even though she's the vendor, it's like HR to HR talking. And she said to me, she's like, I was on client calls yesterday and I got 2 stories for the podcast because people on the call were like, oh my God, I have a story for your podcast. And so it's really this, like, people are dying to share their stories, and it's really fun. It's fun to listen to them. And I mean, these stories are unbelievable, and yet there has not been a single one that I have trouble believing.
Yeah, it's
Seen a lot.
That's sad but true, right? That's the
Yeah.
sad
You
reality
see
we're in.
so much.
Yeah. Well, Kim, how do people get in touch with you, follow you, get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah. You can find me on the internet, LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to at icaretoomuch.substack.com. And you can look at my website, patchworkportfolio.com. That's where I have all of my consulting services and fractional work and writing and design services and all the true patchwork portfolio of things that I do right now to cobble together a career.
Awesome. And we'll link to all that in our show notes. But Kim, thank you so much for
Amazing.
taking some time to come and visit with me. I thoroughly love your HR experience and encourage everyone to go follow your podcast and give you a 5-star review on the different
Thank you.
platforms.
Yes. I know. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. It's my favorite thing to say. And yes, please, if you like it, give us a review. We forgot to ask for that in season 1. We forgot to tell people, like, please go and review us. So now,
You know by now, though.
I don't know. People should know how podcasts work. I don't know. But yes, season 2 is out now. Season 2, episode 1 is wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Kim, thanks so much. Appreciate you today.
Thanks for having me.